Hello, and welcome again to the Solid Rock. I'm Denny Bailey, and this is the Solid Rock Online Sunday School class from First Baptist Church in Oxford, Alabama. I'm delighted you're here today. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the class, and welcome to my home. Today, I want to ask you a question to begin this lesson. When have you seen a minor squabble change into a major rift? And we've all seen those. Maybe we were talking about church here, so maybe that's a place where we can identify this or apply this. But so many times we see minor differences develop into major problems. I Googled this because I was curious as to what the experts might say. Although all of us who go to church are probably considered an expert. Color of the carpet, type of music, staff issues, these are things I thought about. The experts said pride, poor communication, and lack of grace. That's a pretty easy one to step on our toes with. The experts listed four types of riffs that can get big. One was style and changes, maybe worship style, church style, worship music style, changes that take place within the church over a period of time, and we don't go to do the job of getting input from a lot of the people that we should. Another problem, another type of rift is communication gaps. We don't communicate well at times. Maybe the leadership of the church doesn't communicate with the rest of us or something. Another one is control or power. We all want a little control. We want our share of the decision making and the control and the power that goes with that. And then finally, unresolved hurt. People who have been hurt by the church, when they get a chance, they may want to hurt others. So these are all issues that take place in churches, not just churches in Paul's time, but churches in today's time. But we're looking at what Paul says about issues in the church. Remember, we're looking at essentials for Christian living. There's a unit in our quarterly teacher's guide and student guide about this. Essentials for Christian living. The title of our lesson today is An Outward Focus. And instead of focusing inwardly on what I want and what's best for me, maybe we should turn that focus outward and look at what's better for others. Our point of this lesson is to bring glory to God by seeking the welfare of others. It's the fifth, I believe, lesson in this study, Essentials for Christian Living. Paul was addressing the church at Corinth, and one of the issues there was that they had seen minor squabbles change and grow into major rifts. So we're going to look at that today. I love the challenges that this lesson brings about. We've all got to set aside our personal differences, our wants and desires, and go with what other people want. You see, we've got two goals here. One is to give God the glory for whatever we do in this church, any church. And the second issue is we've got to give the desire of others ahead of the desire for ourselves. I remember the old adage, joy. What does joy stand for? First, Jesus. Second, others, and then third, ourselves. So if we put ourselves down at the bottom of that list, joy, Jesus, O for others, and Y for ourselves, yourself, then it tends to make it easier to keep small rifts, small issues small, and big issues don't develop then. So today we see a setting aside our preferences for the good of the body. Set aside our rights. We've all got rights, and we know we've got to claim those, or do we? Can we set those aside? There are 3 points in today's lesson. We're in the 10th chapter of 1 Corinthians, and the 3 points that our lesson makes to help us keep this or develop this outward focus. One is to do what benefits others. We see that in verses 23 and 24 of chapter 10. So do what benefits others. Second point is to don't offend others unnecessarily. In fact, just don't offend others. It's not ever necessary. We can get our point across in a way that shows we have a heart of flesh rather than a heart of stone. And the third one, that's in verses 25 through 30, by the way. And the third point is seek God's glory and others' benefits. That's the whole point of the lesson. Seek first God's glory, then seek the benefit of others before we talk about ourselves. So let's look. We're in the 10th chapter of the book of 1 Corinthians. Verses 23 and 24 start out our lesson when we look at do what benefits others. So let's look at what benefits others. We're in the 10th chapter again, verses 23 and 24. And Paul makes a statement in verse 23. Is this statement true? Listen to this. All things are lawful for me, Paul says in verse 23, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful for me, but not all things edify. Now this in some of your translations, this statement, this verse 23 is put in parentheses. It's almost as if Paul's saying, this is what you said to me, now I'm saying it back to you. And if we really want to look, we can go to back a couple of chapters. This was not part of our Bible study at any point. But in chapter 7, Paul admits a letter from the Corinthians sent to him. He said, now concerning the things you wrote to me, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. Nevertheless, because of sexual immorality, let each man have his wife, and let each woman have her own husband. Now, we don't want to go there. Certainly, I don't want to go there. But it's an issue that he was dealing with. Evidently, there was an issue of sexual immorality in the Corinthian church. I know there was. There were some of our lesson authors have addressed it. And Paul wanted to address it and addresses it somewhat in chapter 7. But he's throwing it back on them. You're telling me, I think he said, this is the gospel according to Denny again, I think you told me all things are lawful. All things are lawful. All right, I'm telling you, all things are lawful, but not all things build up. Not all things are helpful. Not all things are edifying. They don't build a church up. They don't build our brothers and sisters up. And that's a goal that Paul had everywhere he went. He came across and he had to tell the truth, and sometimes that angers so many people. But his goal was never to anger them. His goal was to speak the truth in love. And that's what he talks about in this great chapter. So let's look at these verses. 23 and 24 tell us to do what benefits others. So it says, all things are lawful for me, or permissible for me, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful for me, but not all things edify, or not all things build up. He says in 24, let no one seek his own, but each one the other's well-being. So our goal in the church, in making decisions, in helping make decisions, in getting our points across, it's not for seeking our own. It's not for seeking our own well-being. It's not for seeking the way we want it and what's good for us. It's seeking the welfare of others and the benefit of others and the well-being of others. So that's a very good point. Also in these two verses, we see the absurdity of thinking really everything is permissible. Everything is not permissible. We are in a dilemma as a Christian. We want to do what is lawful according to what Christ gave us, but it doesn't mean we have license to do anything. We have to be careful that we don't err on the side of legalism, which is wrong. On the other hand, we can't lean on the side of license that lets us do anything. There's got to be that middle ground. We are slaves. It's hard to admit sometimes, but we are slaves to the Lord Jesus Christ. We are his servants, and everything we should do should be for his glory, not for our glory. Instead of thinking of ourselves, think of the good of others. Love your neighbor as yourself. Remember that. That's part of the greatest commandment. Love the Lord your God, and then love your neighbor as yourself. Great thing to apply to this particular passage and this particular thought. All right, so we see that there are some things that are permissible but aren't for our good, not helpful. Think of some of these. In the church today, what things are lawful, legal, permissible, but not all are good? What are some things that might be? Anything that might create a spirit of dissension or leave people out of the decision-making process, those would be not good for us to do. They're not helpful. They're not edifying. All right, so we see that. Do what edifies others. Don't do what is just permissible for you. All right, the second point of this lesson is don't offend others if possible. I think always we can say something in a spirit of love. May not always be taken that way. Paul had to talk about the greatest change of thought and change of processes that the Jews had to think of. No longer could they just go with Judaism. They had to accept Jesus as the Christ. The Christ had come. And they didn't want to do that. And they got angry so many times at him. He was beaten. He was stoned. He was left to die. He was shipwrecked. He endured a tough time because he spoke the truth. We've got to learn how to speak the truth in love, but still speak the truth. I know that's a hard thing for me to do. Okay, let's look at verses 25 through 30 and listen for thoughts that say, how can our personal decisions negatively affect other people's relationship with God? We've got to be careful that we do not affect other people's relationship with God. How can we keep from offending others in our culture that are so quick to take offense? And that happens in our day and time. So let's look, verses 25 through 30. Eat whatever is sold in the meat market, asking no questions for conscience sake. Paul is trying to put an example that they can identify with. And they ate in the meat market. They ate at what was there and what was proper for them to eat. I want to read a verse here or a passage here from one of our lesson authors that talk about the issue that Paul's talking about here. The teaching in these verses that no man is to seek his own good, but the good of the other person, can be applied to countless situations in our lives. But Paul tied it to two specific situations relevant to the Corinthian believers: the purchase of meat in the public marketplace and the opportunity to eat with unbelievers. Often, meat in the marketplace had been dedicated to a pagan idol, but not all of it. And without a warning label announcing offered to an idol, the distinction was very rarely clear. So Paul said, here's how he addressed that when it comes to eating meat that you buy in the marketplace. He says, eat whatever is sold in the meat market, asking no questions for conscience sake. For all the earth is the Lord's and all its fullness. God owns it all. And just because some human errantly in a foolish way decides to use it for an idol worship doesn't mean you've changed the context of the meat. So he said, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness therein. That is Psalm 24:1, by the way, that Paul's quoting. If any of those who do not believe invite you to dinner and you desire to go, doesn't mean you have to go, but if an unbeliever invites you to dinner and you choose to go, could be a good thing if you're trying to lead others to Christ. Eat whatever is set before you, asking no questions for conscience sake. Don't go there and then say, oh, was this food offered to an idol? I can't eat it if it is. He didn't say that. He said not to do that. He said, go and eat whatever's there. It doesn't hurt you. You're going to give thanks for it anyway. He said, but if anyone says to you, oh, by the way, brother, this was offered to idols, do not eat it for the sake of the one who told you and for conscience sake. For the earth is the Lord's and all its fullness. I'm going to go back and read Mark 7, 19 and 20, because this addresses that issue. This is Jesus speaking, and Jesus says, he said, don't you understand that whatever enters a man from outside cannot defile him? Might give him a stomach ache, but it won't defile him, because it does not enter his heart, but his stomach, and is eliminated, thus purifying all foods. Jesus said this, and he said, what comes out of a man, that defiles a man. So Jesus is saying that all foods are clean, all foods are possible to be eaten. The Jews couldn't eat pork, still don't eat pork, but pork does not cause a man to be unclean anymore. That's not what's meant by this anymore. Jesus addressed that. So he's saying, if you, whatever's sold in the meat market, let me read that again because I get it in some kind of context. Asking no questions for conscience sake. Don't go in there asking, has this food been offered to idols? That's not your place. You're going to their home. You're eating their food. For the earth is the Lord's and all its fullness. If any of those who do not believe invites you to dinner and you desire to go, eat whatever is set before you, asking no questions for conscience sake. But if anyone says to you, this was offered to idols, do not eat it for the sake of the one who told you and for conscience sake. For the earth is the Lord's and all its fullness. Conscience, I say, not your own, but that of the other. For why is my liberty judged by another man's conscience? But if I partake with thanks, why am I evil spoken of for the food over which I give thanks? But you're not worried just about your conscience. You're also worried about the one who spoke to you and said, you can't eat that, brother. That's offered to idols. Their opinion is just as valid for their internal organs as yours is for your internal organs. Their peace and their cleanliness is just as important as your cleanliness. Yeah, you can give thanks for it, and God blesses that. God doesn't say that that's harmful, but you're causing another person to stumble, particularly an unbeliever who may be looking at what you do. So it's important that we are careful not to give offense to other people. Our culture thrives on people being offended, and yet we have to care for the rights of other people. Jesus already said that all foods are clean. We just read that, but that's for our own conscience. But when we talk about someone else and we've got them looking at us, why create confusion? Why create a hard feeling when all we can do is try to honor their feelings as well? So God says, don't offend others if possible. Paul said that. God said that through Paul. All right, so we see that. That's the second point of this lesson, don't offend others. The third point of this lesson is seek God's glory and the good of others. Let's read verses 31 through 33. Therefore, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, this is a great verse. Paul says, therefore, because of all these things I've said, whatever you eat or drink or whatever you do, not just eating or drinking, but in every area of life, in whatever you eat or drink or whatever you do all to the glory of God. Now, is that not a great statement? Whatever you do, eat, drink, whatever, do it all for the glory of God. Give no offense either to the Jews or the Greeks or the church of God. Try not to offend any group. The Jews were easily offended because they didn't eat certain things. They had dietary requirements that were necessary, they thought, but they didn't listen to what Jesus had said, obviously. So whether you're speaking to them or to the Greeks who thought their wisdom was second to none, they were pride fulfilled in their hearts because of the wisdom they supposedly espoused. Remember what Jesus said last week? What Paul said? That Jesus had also said, it's foolishness. The cross is considered foolishness to those who don't believe, whether you're Jews or Greeks. But now he says, be careful of what you say to the Jews or the Greeks or to the church of God, just as I also please all men in all things, not seeking my own profit, but the profit of many. Why? Why, Paul? Why? So that they may be saved. So there's a reason. God says we can all benefit. We put ourselves in secondary importance. We take the importance of others before ours. We take the importance of God first. And even though it may have to offend somebody, we must speak the truth. We try to do it in love. We must do it in love. But then when it comes to opinions, and importance of how we feel, we don't judge ourselves first. We don't put ourselves first out there. We put others and let them do it. Here's the question that's always going to pop itself up. Does what I'm doing bring the glory to God? In everything I do, remember what Paul said, in eating and drinking, in everything you do all for the glory of God. Do we do that? Are we doing that as importance? So let me close with a little short survey. This is not meant to be a definitive statement where you see where you are, but think about 5. These are just questions for you to apply for yourself. 5 questions. Engage in these answers. And I seek to get away with what is permissible in the Christian life. Do you do that? Do you always do that? Do you regularly do that? Do you sometimes do that? Do you rarely do that? Or do you never do that? I always seek to get away with what is permissible in the Christian life. That should obviously be a never, certainly a rarely. But how do you judge that in your own life? I always seek to get away with what is permissible in the Christian life. Second question, I work to seek the good of others above myself. That's something we should do. Where do you stand on that? Never, sometimes, regularly, always? How would you judge yourself on that second question? The third question, I focus on bringing God glory and not myself. That's a hard thing to do. I struggle with that sometimes. Is what I do right? I think it is. But does it bring God glory or does it bring glory to me? I've got to be careful and not bring glory to me. So always, regularly, sometimes, rarely, never. How would you answer, I focus on bringing God glory and not myself? The fourth question, I seek to build myself up more than focusing on building up others. We have to be careful not to do that. The last question, I seek what will benefit many and not only benefit myself. We should do that. So, interesting lesson today. It's a lesson that takes into consideration our feelings. We first must please God. Whatever we do has to please Him. If possible, we put others before ourselves, unless they're wrong, unless we know they're wrong. But always we seek to point that out, to tell the truth in love. Guys, I love you and I thank you for being here today. Thank you for joining us in this lesson. I pray that you have a great week and I love you guys.